right? We're going to be talking about where the food business industry and the tourism industry can find these synergy opportunities. And so I'm looking forward to explore this throughout this process, and definitely open to exploring it with you all. So I'm excited to hear your comments, your questions throughout the process, and I will be stopping throughout it. So if you have any, please feel free to share. So I have an educator hat as well as an education technician in my former life in National Park Service. And so I always like to start defining these key concepts, right? And so synergy, according to Merriam-Webster, is this mutually advantageous conjunction or compatibility of distinct businesses, participants, or elements, such as resources or efforts. So that's definitely what we're trying to see, where tourism and agriculture meet in agritourism, right? And so I actually took a deep dive in this subject, and this is an article that it's unfortunately in Spanish. I couldn't find it in English, but it talks about how there is these synergic opportunities within agritourism as a tool for development in the Caribbean. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be touching on throughout the process of this presentation. And obviously, we have to define agritourism. And so this is something that I found interesting. Within the United Nations, they have this institution that's called the World Tourism Organization. And they're basically the leading voice, right, in regards to the tourism industry throughout the world. And so they have this document where they have all these definitions, right, on the tourism industry. Because now tourism is not just tourism, it's tourism with a last name or the first name, right? It definitely has expanded to all these diverse forms of tourism. And so within agritourism, the UN actually defines more so rural tourism, and which is kind of like along the lines, right? And it's a type of tourism or activity in which the visitor experiences related a wide range of products that could be linked to nature-based activities, agricultural, rural lifestyle. So there's a lot of it involved. And so definitely that's the closest thing that we could define within agritourism. So this is actually a really cool document. You can find it online. I can share it as well. But if you're interested in looking a little bit more into what are the other types of tourism, I invite you to check that out. And so as I said, I took a deep dive in my former life as a communicator. I loved research journalism, so I definitely did a lot of that throughout this process. And so I found this really interesting article that was published by Forbes, and they were basically talking about this report that American Express released about their travel trends for 2021. And so this is basically like the distilled information in regards to what this report basically found out. And so I can, the link is right there. I can also be sharing this article with you also. You can take a deep dive as I did as well. But in sum, what they basically found out is these interesting percentages. And so basically it says 65% of people that received the vaccine plan to travel afterwards. So they're already looking forward to being vaccinated and just jumping on a plane and getting to wherever they're wanting to go, because they've been looking at it throughout this whole year and just wanting it so bad, right? So that's definitely within the plans of the 65% of the people that were interviewed in this report. 78% are seeking to have a well-being component in their next vacation. So this is very interesting, because if you think about the concept which agritourism brings, there's so much you can reach out to what what well-being could be, right? We're basically growing food. We are providing the most fundamental thing for everybody. So, and also the places that we might have that are located in rural areas that people can disconnect and connect with nature and connect with other, with the earth. I think that's definitely a setting for well-being. So I'm already teasing you with these, just so you have an idea. 62% are looking for good culinary experiences, and that's a priority. 62%. Culinary experiences, need I say more? We're producing food. 75% are looking for greater privacy, personalized experiences, and high cleaning standards. greater privacy, ruralcy, doesn't sound like maybe something we can offer. Yes, maybe it is. 69% are looking to visit lesser known places. And that's something that I definitely saw. I worked in the most like touristy area of Puerto Rico, and I could see this interesting trend of visitors that were coming in and were like, okay, yeah, I'm done with looking at the most traditional and most touristy area in Puerto Rico. Now I want to see, something else. I have a car, I want to drive far away. What can I see that's like the lesser known areas of the Puerto Rico? And I'm like, okay, great. And I would definitely provide them, with my own personal suggestions. So there's definitely that search to go beyond the traditional attractions that all the regions and locations currently have. And then finally, this last one was very interesting. 59% are looking to get involved in philanthropic opportunities or volunteer experiences, which is something that you can easily tie within agritourism. And we're going to explore that a little bit more in a second. So as I mentioned, like this is something that for me is just screaming agritourism. And the thing that's interesting for me is that this article does not mention agritourism. I don't think in one moment in the whole thing. And maybe you can check it out later. But if I can't recall, I don't ever see the person directly talking about agritourism as a means of like providing, an offer for the people that are looking at these things. So again, I definitely can see how the trend for agritourism can be covered. And this is another interesting fact for those of you that like more, the number side of things. This is a report called the Verified Market Report, and it was released in September 2020. So it's in the middle of the pandemic, right? And you can obviously tell that tourism was an industry that was heavily effective during the pandemic. But it's interesting to see that in the middle of the pandemic, they're talking about agritourism and the growth that it might have during the next 5 years. So it's speaking of 2019 is a year that it had a growth of 5.5 million. And within 5 years, it's going to top 10.1 million. So again, this is very interesting to see, and it's good to see how the trend doesn't seem to stop even within a pandemic situation, because it's not, I don't think it's spite of, I think it's because of people are looking to get away from the crowds, right? They're looking for more direct experience, as we were seeing, right, in these trends. So again, I think this is something very positive for us to know about. A little bit more on the side of like public policy, and this is something that I also found very interesting that happened in 2020. To provide a little context, the UN, the United Nations in 2015 gathered and got together with all the world's leaders and these common goals that essentially are meant to end poverty, to care for the planet, and to care for the people that live in it, right? And so we got together and say, these are the sustainable development goals. We're going to provide policies and systems so we can reach these in 15 years. So by 2030, we're supposed to be working actively towards these. And they talked about how tourism actually can hit several of these. I think it was like 8, and I think it was maybe 14. But the interesting thing was that in 2020, the UN, the United Nations, got together, the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Tourism Organization, into working for a common agenda that will actually accelerate and hit more of these sustainable development goals that if they were working apart. What does it sound like? Synergy, right? And that's awesome. I think to see that also in the government context, in a world context, right? I think it's also very enlightening. So that's, I think, something that led to this very great article, very great document, which are these recommendations that they worked on. And the UN, let me go back to that a little bit. The World Tourism Organization celebrates a yearly World Tourism Day. And so last year, in the context of the World Tourism Day, they decided to dedicate it to rural development, tourism and rural development. And so that's when these two organizations got together and got, these resources put together. So this is something that's public. It's actually in various languages in online. I'm also going to be sharing this in our post email so you can take a look at it. But there's definitely a lot of insight that you can take away if you're interested in looking at, the more, public policy context. What I really liked was this line that says developing tourism in rural communities is a way that contributes to inclusive, sustainable, and resilient development. So we're looking at it not just, as this great trend, but also as a tool to develop areas that traditionally are marginalized from tourism, that are not traditionally touched or accessed from the traditional ways that tourism has been developed. So I feel like agritourism is the gateway to that, right? And diving deeper into our regional context in the Caribbean, there's this other interesting article in Forbes that was talking about how it is definitely a driving force for development. Also because of our regional context regarding climate and regarding all the challenges that we have. And I feel like I can speak for everybody when it comes to what we've seen, post-hurricane disaster situations, how we can definitely find a way to, I would say, to balance, right, the loss that we might have had from a situation like Maria, a situation like Dorian, with agritourism initiatives that could gather people for support and to help us get through these processes quicker. So how can we maximize these opportunities through agritourism? I think it's definitely a great way to look at that. So a little bit on that background. As I mentioned, was going to be very brief. Now I want to jump into some of very technical or more technical tools that could help you maybe get started on agritourism. Maybe you already have an agritourism attraction and you want to explore other ventures, because there's so many things you can do, right? We have so many opportunities, and it really depends also on your reality, right? What do you got to offer as a farm or as a food business or as a fisher? But before that, I'm going to stop really quick just to see if we have any questions. Sorry, I feel like my computer is not collaborating today and I can't see my, I can't see the question, sorry. Wadis, can you help me? Let me see.
So yeah. Maybe I lost you.
Can you help me with the questions? I can't see my.
Oh yeah, there's just one question. The question read in the same. Are there any certification for agrotourism?
Yes, and we were going to be talking about that a little bit later. I don't know if the person could follow up with where they're from, because that will depend obviously on the local context. There are some regional educational opportunities, but initially, yes. We can explore that a little bit later.
Great. Thanks, Pam. So Barbara, just let us know where you're from, and we will share with you the information we have. Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Wadi. All right. So let's then. I think she might have answered, right? Let me see.
Yeah, Barbara is from St. Croix.
St. Croix. Okay. Well, that we can talk, Barbara, because I had trouble finding information as well, but maybe you can give me, you can enlighten me. But let's move forward because we're going to hit on certifications eventually. But before we move to certifications, right, I want to take you through a process that could help you better source or identify what it is that you want, where do you want to take it, and then based on that, how far do you want to take it? Do you want a certification? Do you want a course? You want to, that's definitely up to everyone's interest. But I want to start with this concept, right, of defining your agritourism offer. So I guess sometimes we're like thinking of these concepts and like, oh, this is trending, this is interesting, but like, why would I want this? Because obviously this is something that's going to take time and resources from you. So before we jump into that, I want you to really kind of think through, what is your goal with, jumping into an agritourism initiative? Kind of like that who am I question, right? That existential question. So maybe what you're needing is labor, right? You are not finding enough labor, or you have an expansion coming up and you're definitely needing that extra support, that extra pair of hands. So that's might be the main motive that is pushing you to maybe open up your farm to host people. You may be looking for income diversification, and it's definitely a great initiative to do that, because you're probably selling a product and it's going well, but the pandemic has not been helping, and so right now this might be a way to kind of pair up and balance out the budget. So definitely something worth exploring. Maybe what you're looking for is to for people to know your brand. You have this X type of cheese that you really want people to know that is in the supermarket. So you're making this experience so people get to know where the cheese comes from and where they can get it, right? And where they can buy it. And so you have a person that goes into your farm and they can leave with a pack of cheese and say, hey, I got this at a farm. You can get this in X, Y, and Z, and the whole family buys it, right? So that might be a reason why you're wanting to have this. You want to increase production in your sales. You might want to have a stand, a selling point in your farm. You want to have a restaurant, so you're maybe not selling all your products, but then hey, you have a restaurant that opens Friday to Sunday. That's where you have your surplus products go to, right? And work around that, right? Maybe you say, hey, Pamela, no, I'm actually interested in providing educational opportunities because I really want this to be a live laboratory, and I want kids to come in and check them, check whatever's going on and connect that with their curriculum. Fantastic. Then that's definitely a way that you can go about. Maybe you want to open up your farm to connect with your community and you want to provide community service. Fantastic. Or you want to open up and explore how you can provide or connect with cross-sector alliances, because you never know who's going to visit your farm, right? You never know who's going to come in and take a tour of your farm. It might be a big distributor that sees, hey, this is something worth supporting, so I'm going to offer, an opportunity to distribute their product through my company. You never know. So that's definitely something worth weighing in as well, that you never know who your client might be kind of popping up the door anytime. So once you have that kind of figured out, I always invite, before we jump into the more fun stuff, I always invite you to think of the essentials. And I think this is more in relation to safety and security. We don't really think about safety and security until we have an issue on safety and security, right? Someone trips, or there's so many things that can happen, and especially in the areas that we work in, right? There's so many hazards. So we definitely want to do an evaluation process. We want to look at our facilities and say, do I have parking? Is it for two people, for two cars? Then I can't take maybe more than 8 people, at a time. Do I have bathrooms, or is it going to be, nature's call? You're going to go out into the wilderness and whatever happens. And, that might be the experience itself. People are looking for that. Hey, there is definitely a market for anything these days. So you have to identify, right, if that's the resource that you're going to provide, or if you're just going to go with al natural. Road access. Do people need 4x4s? Do you need to invest in a 4x4? Do you need to invest in an ATV to get people from A to B? So that's one thing that you also need to think through. Disinfecting station, an area to process your COVID protocol. That's definitely something that people are looking for, like we looked at previously, that experience, but they feel that the area is clean, that everything is taken care of in that regard, then they don't have to worry about, being extra cautious about things. So having that, sanitization station or a process is going to be valuable in COVID times. Thinking about a resting areas, an area that has shade definitely helps, because you might be used to being, 4 hours at a time, 5 hours at a time under the sun, but maybe your future volunteers or your tour visitors won't be. So thinking about those realities as well and thinking about their comfort is a good call when it comes to organizing what the essentials are. And when it comes to safety and security, obviously having some sort of first aid kit, a first aid process, maybe someone needs to get CPR, maybe, thinking about those what ifs when it comes to safety and security and those possible hazards. So maybe your farm has cliffs, maybe you might need to invest in some sort of fencing because that's an area that might not be safe for people to just kind of barge in. So those are things you definitely need to think through before you jump into anything else. Along with thinking, you write what's your availability in regards to time, in regards to resources. Do I have the human resources to be, I don't know, every Saturday having two tours, from with 20 people, or that going to be me? I'm going to have to commit another day, or do I have farmers markets on Saturday that I can't make it? We have to think about all that before we even jump into action, right? Um, I also highly, highly, highly recommend we research necessary permits or insurance needs. And this is going to be very unique for every case, because it's going to be based also on the type of attraction that you might be providing. In Puerto Rico, for example, the very basic insurance that you need is the insurance of, I don't know how to translate that well, but it's like insurance of public responsibility. There might be some similar permits in the other locations that we work in, but that's a research and a process that you need to look into depending on the type of services that you want to provide. Also to think through what are the types of signage or tools that you might need, because you might know your farm, from top to bottom. You might know where the bathrooms are, where the areas that um, people might be able to access certain areas of the farm, and you might not be wanting them to access certain areas. You would have to need signage for that, right? People are not just going to know about it. So that's definitely a thing that you need to think through, because these are investments. So um, before one person even steps on your farm, this might be things that you should analyze, right? And then have an emergency plan. I think this is a standard, right? Having an emergency plan, knowing what your emergency contacts are, where's the nearest hospital, what's the quickest route, closest police station. All of those are always a good to have. Regardless if you're starting agritourism business, I always recommend you have those at hand. So now to the fun side and to the fun aspect of this, which is thinking about your attractions. And this could go many, many, many ways. Because as I mentioned, each of our farms, each of our businesses are unique. So we might have very different opportunities or very different needs based on the first question, right? Who am I? What do I want? We can pair those up with these types of attractions. So here I set basically like a broad example of all the different avenues that you can maybe go out to. So you might be able to start with experiences, with guided tours, set up a guided tour with all different locations and an experience at the end. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Maybe I have the facilities to have accommodations. I can maybe have a space that I can clear the land and have a camping site. Maybe I want to go a little bit further and I want to do a glamping. If you don't know what glamping is, we're going to explain it a little bit. Or maybe I have some extra rooms and I want to do an Airbnb. An B&B. There's a lot of avenues in which you can think through when it comes to accommodations. Maybe I have natural resources. I have a river, I have a lake, I have a stream, some trails around my farm that are very beautiful, that have big trees. All of those can be potential attractions. Your place could also host events such as weddings, retreats, dinners, workshops. You could provide workshops. You could have your space for people to provide workshops in. You could have a place for people to do work retreats. You can provide talks. So there's a lot of room for growth in regards to events, because usually our farms have space, right? So that's what we're needing in COVID times, a lot of space to do things. And so people are looking for avenues such as farms, for example, to do their weddings nowadays. So thinking about that as a potential avenue, maybe you can market your farm in that regard. Also, animal care. You can take care of animals in your farm. You can be a foster care or like a pet hotel, but you can also have people come in to take care of your animals because people enjoy that as well. You might have horses and people are like, oh, I want to connect with horses. When then that's the opportunity, right? You might have goats, you might have chickens. So all of those could be potential opportunities to connect with a market that is going to be interested in that. Okay. A little bit more, right? We can talk about environmental education, interpretation. I want to talk a little bit about that. That's one of my opportunities as a ranger to learn a little bit more about interpretation, and that's a really cool tool. Gastronomy, we can, you know, talk about a farm to table restaurant. We can invite chefs for special events, for cookouts. There's a lot to explore there as well. And then along the lines of species identification, bird watching, all those within educational volunteer opportunities, we can explain a little bit more about volunteering opportunities. So these are, again, all the different avenues that you can go depending on A, what you're looking for, and B, what you have. So connecting those two would be a great way to start designing these opportunities, which is what we're going to do right now. We're going to then talk that now that you've defined your agritourism offer, that you kind of seek through what it is that you have available, what it is that you want, what it is that you need. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the examples we just provided now. So I'm going to be providing you at least with 4 tools. I think they're the main ones that you can look into and then dive deeper, you know, depending on your interests. So let's go ahead. The first one, it is how to provide or how to put together a guided tour or experience. And I'm adding experience because this is definitely something that I want you to take away. If there's one thing, people are not looking anymore to just go to a place and see, oh, this is so pretty, and take a couple pictures. No. People are looking to see, to touch, to taste, to smell. They want the experience. They're not looking anymore to just the sightseeing. I could see that on YouTube, right? I want to taste it. I want to explore it. I want to live it. And so that is the big difference and the big trend that you're seeing throughout the tourism industry, regardless of the type of tourism. It is something that's coming across. And so that's one thing that I want you to think through when you're going to be providing a guided tour. And how does this work? Well, I broke it down in 3 easy steps on how you can put this together. The first thing, your pitch. And what is your pitch? Your pitch is literally who you are in 5 minutes. Like, how can you sum up what it is that you're about in 3, 5, maybe 7 minutes? I mean, we can go a little bit further if you're planning to do like an extended tour. It really depends also on how long you want to extend this. Maybe you have a 1 hour offer and then a 2 hour offer. So really depends on how much you want to like stretch it. But your pitch is essentially, I guess what we ask you in when we're in the application process. If you've already gone through our application process, we have this first paragraph, like, tell us what you're about, right? Like, what it is that you do, how did you get started, what did you grow, you know, what are you about? So I always recommend that you write these out because this is actually really helpful. If you don't already have this, maybe in your business plan or maybe in some website or in some social media, I recommend that you do this exercise and you have it at hand, because this is always going to be helpful for anything, for applications, for you to presenting yourself to a potential buyer or a client. I think this is always a great exercise to be able to condense, right? Because you can tell who you're about in like, woo, right? In the whole conversation, but how do you condense that? That, I think, is the key. And less is always more. So do that exercise and write down. And some, guiding questions might be, how did you get started? What did you grow? What are your facilities like? What do you have? You can also provide an historical context in your region. Maybe your region was not a productive region. You can also talk about your own story. And this is very important because this is something that people are more and more looking for. What is your story. What is your background? Maybe my farm has been abandoned by my family for 20 years, and now I am moving back to my hometown and I am starting to grow, and I've been growing this, and I've been working on this project, and now I've made alliance with 2 restaurants in the region, so all of that, it's juicy, right? People like that. So that's definitely something that you want to share in this pitch. So once you get them right, all kind of like involved in your story, and they're like, oh yeah, tell me more. You then provide them with a little movement, right? Let's start to move around in your area. And my suggestion is to then choose 2 to 3 locations that tell your story, that better describe your project, your operation. Maybe it's the step by step, like we grow here, we harvest here, we clean here, and then we package here. Or maybe it's, it's a beautiful site, and then it's, the place where you take your well-deserved break after a long day of work, and it's a nice little hammock. This is where you can get creative, and there's definitely a lot of creativity involved. So I want you to tease your brains, because this is where you're going to be then kind of starting to get them, acquainted with your space. And some, guiding questions for this might be, why did you choose this place? Like, what does it say about you? Like, is it a greenhouse? Is it your aquaculture, or like a aquaponic system? Is it where you clean your fish? Why did you choose it? What does it say about your project? But also, what can people start to see, start to hear, start to smell? Maybe you give them something to taste or to smell, or like, oh, mira, taste this. So definitely start teasing them, start teasing their senses. The more senses you get people involved, the better, because we base our memories based on our senses, based on the inputs that we have. And the more inputs that we have, the better we're going to remember it. And that's something that's very important for us to capture, right? Maybe we saw it once and it's like, okay, yeah, I might have seen it, and if I see it in a picture I might remember it, but it's like, okay, it's the vague memory. But maybe I saw it and I tasted it and I smelled it, and and all of that combined builds the memory, and it's easier to go back and remember. So if you want to make a memorable experience, combine all the senses that you can, which take us then to the third portion of our guided tour, which is the experience. So once we take them around, once we kind of, give them a little overview of what it is that our business is all about, we then identify a specific thing, a specific opportunity for them to really connect and to use their hands, or to to actually actively use their body to do something in your business. And that could be a volunteering opportunity. Hey, maybe you need the help, you need to set all these seedlings, right? And time is running out, and right, so hey, that's definitely a great opportunity. Like, and now we're going to finish off with, how do we prepare these seedlings? So this is something that we can incorporate then into our tour. So volunteering, great way to connect with our guided tour. We can always give them something to taste. And this is something that's easy for us, right? We're in a farm, we're already surrounded by things, or we're in a food business, we already have our things, our production going, or maybe we are a fisher and we might have some prepped up ceviche or something like that, right? So definitely trying your own food, a great experience. And it's not really that hard. It won't really take you out of your way that much, right? You can also take them to a natural resource that you have. Maybe you have a stream nearby. You can clear out the land and set up a couple of tables and chairs. Beautiful. And last but not least, like I mentioned, you can take them and take care of your animals. Maybe you have a cow and they want to milk your cow. Hey, that's a amazing experience for maybe a kid that's never even seen where milk is, comes from. And you might be surprised how many people are so disconnected from the food that they eat. They've probably never seen a carrot come out of the ground, and that's so valuable for people, and we take it for granted, but it might be such an amazing experience for people. So summed up, pitch your tour, your actual right? 2 to 3. And again, this is just a suggestion. 2 to 3 might take you half an hour. And maybe we're talking about an hour-long tour here. But if you're looking to have a couple offers, maybe you're having a 1 hour tour, and maybe you're having a 3 hour that includes a hike to your stream and back. Hey, that is awesome. And those are two different services that you can have two different incomes from, right? So again, creativity. I think that's the key here. One example that I like to provide that I feel does an amazing job at a guided tour is Vaca Negra here in Puerto Rico. And they produce cheese made out of cow milk, which is in Puerto Rico. It's something actually pretty novel. We didn't have a lot of cheese production, to be honest, a local cheese producers at least that were like doing it maybe on a larger scale. We always had this more artisanal production of cheese, mind you, of course. But Vaca Negra has turned their cheese production into a whole experience as well. So they receive visitors in their facilities, which take them into this process. First, they teach them a little bit more on the background of milk production in the region, because Vaca Negra is actually located in an area in Puerto Rico that historically has been very productive in regards to milk. But to be doing that added value production, I think it's very innovative. So they talk to their visitors about, where the area is, where they're located, what the story about the region is. Then they do a tasting, right? You go in and you taste all the different cheeses, and you're like, oh, how do you pair this with this wine? And they kind of talk a little bit about how you can pair the cheeses with different foods and all that. But then you don't just taste it, you make your own cheese. You then go into this room where you have all the different ingredients that you can mix and match and make your own cheese. And once you make it, they pack it for you. And then 2 months later, you can go and pick it up and eat your cheese. I mean, how amazing is that? And this is something that it doesn't go out of your way too much, because they're already producing the cheese. And hey, they're giving a sample to people to taste. They have a place for them to buy it, so they can get it at the store. So once they go out, they know where they can continue to buy Vaca Negra's cheese. So it's, it works all around, right? And this is kind of like the kind of like whew, the cost per experience and the way they've kind of paired it up. The experience is either per person or a couple. And so you can also play with that as well. If it's going to be a combo, if it's like a family of 4, it's a 2, or maybe you're interested in having bigger groups. Well, if you're 8 or more, you get a discount. You can definitely work around those. But also, so you have an idea of how much, these types of experiences are costing. And hey, 10 people at $60 per person, you do the math, right? I think that's a good income for a one-day activity. So again, these are just things to kind of start poking your brain and getting you into action, into developing your own. Another way that or attraction that you can develop within agritourism is for education purposes. And this is something that I have personally worked a lot with, right, in my former experience within Peace Corps and also within the National Park Service. And so this is one tool that I wanted to touch on today, because I feel like within education, there's definitely curriculum-based education, and we can all go, towards that line and see how we can connect our own processes in our farms or in our businesses to curriculum standards in all of our locations. And that's one tool that I invite you all to check out, your own curriculum standards. Each country has their own. And so it's basically this rule book that says, what are kids supposed to be learning at what grade in which course or which materials. So, an easy one for us is science, right? We can look at the science curriculum that we have in our country and see how we can attach those with our own processes, and then reach out to our local schools or the science teachers and say, hey, come in, we have, curriculum-based activities that you can connect with your kids. But if you're looking to have something a bit more informal, you can also go an avenue and use this tool, which is called interpretation as an educational tool. And interpretation as a concept, you might talk, you might hear it and you're like, wait, an interpreter is someone that translates, right? It's like English or to Spanish, or maybe someone that does sign language. And in a sense, it's kind of like that. But it's more like a translator of your surroundings, kind of in a sense. So it's a way to connect the tangible and the local with the intangible and the universal. And I'm gonna dive deeper into this because this is really fun. Um, Interpretation, it has its definition, and here's my educator hat again, right? The National Association for Interpretation, or the NAI, defines interpretation as a mission-based communication process that forges emotional and intellectual connections between the interests of the audience and the meanings on the resource. So this is essentially, how are we talking for the resource itself and connecting with the audience that we're with in a way that they can um, reflect back into their own reality and their own experience and find that meaningful connection. And that might be something that you're like, okay, so I'm kind of getting that, Pam. I don't know where you're going with this, but bear with me. This concept of interpretation has its origins within the conservationist movement in the United States. And so this is actually something that is very much tied in to the development of the idea of preserving land for the meaning of recreation and preservation. So this man, John Muir, he's considered the father of the national parks. He actually started the Sierra Club in the United States, and he was a big advocate for a lot of big open lands that today are beautiful national parks in the United States. Yosemite, for example, Yosemite National Park was a park that he very much deemed and loved. And so, in a nutshell, he talked he was basically one of the first people that talked about the meaning of interpretation. And here's a beautiful quote that I always share from him that says, "I'll interpret the rocks, learn the language of the flood, storm, and the avalanche. I'll acquaint myself with the glaciers and wild gardens and get as near the heart of the world as I can." So this is beautiful, right? I love it. But it, in a sense, right, it kind of encaptures what is the purpose of interpretation, is really to make a resource relevant. And so let me give you an example before I actually jump into this, because it looks scary. For example, for me, I used to work in this national park that is this big fortification. And I would get kids all the time because I was an education technician. So for me, it was interpretation. My interpretive moment, or my interpretive tool, or the common tool that I would use with the kids, was the historical graffiti in the forts, which is something that not a lot of people know. The soldiers would get bored too while they were standing in these 12-hour shifts, just looking out into the ocean and seeing if a ship comes in or whatever, right? And so they would get bored and they would start drawing in the walls. And so you have a lot of really cool drawings, mostly ships and boats and birds, but cool anyway, right? So it was really neat to take them through this specific area in the fort. And so as I'm walking through it, you can't really tell which are the drawings, and then until you kind of like tell them, and it's very evident. It's like, oh, it's cool, it's a boat, look at that, right? So to see that kind of like to see that drawing magically appear in front of their eyes was really neat. It was like, oh, and you can see this is the drawing, and they would get bored, and this is graffiti. And graffiti is not a modern thing. It's not this hip cool thing that you all do nowadays, right? People would do this historically. And also, this is why we want to conserve the graffiti and not have you guys doing drawings and graffitis on the wall. So it was also a way to educate them on how to preserve the fortifications, but also bringing them back to that moment, as a bored soldier looking out into the ocean and then just drawing with a piece of whatever they can find around. So again, this is just an example of how interpretation can use the knowledge of the audience, who your audience is, and how you can speak to your audience about your resource based on who they are. And so this is why it brings me to this moment, which is I also find kind of like scary, which is our formula, right? The interpretation formula. And it looks kind of weird and like what the heck are you sharing with us, Pam? But it essentially is, I break it down below. The uh, QR is knowledge of the resource. And so, for example, if you were to use the interpretive tool, uh, you already are subject matter experts on your resource, right? You're there all the time. You're there in your farm, day in, day out. You fish day in, day out. You produce your food day in, day out. So you know your resource. You know what it is all about. You can definitely, explain or cater to explaining about it. And maybe you already do. And maybe you already have that like that pitch, right? And that kind of like same line that you give to everybody. And that's why interpretation is not a tour. It goes beyond that. It's not just, I'm going to give you that same line, that same, information. Is like, okay, I know of the resource, but the KA is knowledge of the audience. So who are you speaking to? Maybe you have a way to know who's going to visit you. Maybe you have some sort of form that you can collect some data, some additional data, like, where are they visiting from? What are your interests? What do you want to know about? Something as simple as that can give you so much powerful information on how to cater to that experience. And so, for example, maybe this person is coming from somewhere that they, oh no, my grandma used to grow a lot of potatoes, and I really remember my grandma, and that's why I want to go and visit your farm, because boom, you have there a connection. Maybe you don't have potatoes, maybe you do, but if you do, like, that will be the main crop that you might, take them around and they can explore and touch and feel, so again, knowledge is power. And so the more you know your audience, the more meaningful the experience will be. And that's when this third thing comes in, which is once you know your resource, which you already do, you get to know your audience, then you use the appropriate technique. And those, aplenty. There are so many techniques that you can use, and you can research that really quick. Interpretive techniques. There's books on it even. You can like have them one by one. Something as simple as having images. But we have something better. We have a whole farm. So it's definitely a whole technique in and of itself that we can use within our interpretive opportunities. So once you know your resource, you know your audience, you put those together and you apply your appropriate technique, you then have that interpretive opportunity. And that's the aha moment. That's like, wow, that's awesome. That's when my kids were like, whoa, that's a drawing of a boat. I didn't see that. I was right by it and I didn't see it. Like that whole like, whoa, that's cool. So that's what you want to get at with your people. You don't want them to just kind of go around. It's like, oh, okay, this is great. I love it. Okay, let me take a selfie. Fantastic. You want them to go with that, wow, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life kind of thing, right? And we should all try and strive for that, I guess. One great example that I'd like to share with you all that has an amazing educational offering is Plenitud in Puerto Rico. I have more examples, but this is definitely a great example because they have different models of educational offer that they provide. So they have service learning excursions that are more geared towards like a local group. So for example, those alternative breaks, they connect the local curriculum standards to these tours. And so that they have a great offer for local groups that want to connect, their science curriculum or do some hands-on experiences. That's what they offer for them. They have academic trips, and this is more of a setting for student travel groups. So they have alliances with different universities that they host, every summer or every other fall, and they're staying there for 2 weeks, and they get paid for that, right? They get paid for providing those services, for providing those opportunities. And so they basically have put together this whole curriculum on different topics such as agroecology, water conservation, bioconstruction. Hey, you might be a subject matter expert in something that it's within, your business, and it's worthy of sharing your knowledge, right? So this is an opportunity for you to kind of connect with that. Okay. And then agritourism is educational opportunities, but more catered to the public. So as you can see, they've already thought through even what types of profiles they want to cater to. And so that's something they want to think about as well. You might not want to host everybody in your farm. It might be a specific type of visitors that you want to have. So depending on that, that will be, how you will be designing your offer. Connecting with all of this, we can also maximize agritourism to host volunteer opportunities. And this is a win-win situation, right? A no-brainer. If you have a ton of tasks that you've been meaning to work on, if you have pending tasks, I've been meaning to work on that fencing for the longest time, hey, this might be an opportunity. Or there's a big harvest coming in soon. Hey, you already know when you're going to have those harvests by this time, I'm assuming, right? So again, this might be the opportunity for you to provide a volunteering opportunity. The basics for this are, and these are all suggested, and you can always research more because there's a ton of resources for volunteering specifically. I always suggest that you start with identifying which tasks and which areas you want to impact with your volunteering opportunity. So it might be a specific lot that you want to plant some trees on. It might be some more general maintenance tasks, some day-to-day tasks such as weeding. It might be, like I mentioned, like a bigger, a bulkier task such as putting up a fencing. This is something that you need to think through before you have one person showing up, because then what they're gonna do. You're just gonna they're gonna tell. They're gonna tell if they're like making stuff up. But it's a good practice to always think through what it is that you're needing and support with, right? Because it might be a bunch of things, but you really haven't like broke it down, right? And you're like, okay, this whole thing, but then what are the specific tasks that you need to get this whole thing done? Think through that. Also, what types of tools will you be needing for this person to complete this task? So you might have three three machetes, and because that's what you use all the time, and you and your other two workers, and someone comes in and the task requires them to clean out an area, but they don't have the tools, so they basically wasted their time and yours. So think through, depending on the task, what's the tool. You might provide it, or you might even tell them to bring it. Hey, that might be part of the experience. You have to bring your own tool. Sorry, right? But you have to think through that, because they shouldn't get there and then, sorry, we don't have the tools. Why don't you do this boring thing instead, right? While we are like going away to machete. Maybe that's not the greatest example, because maybe that's a hazard. Who knows? That's the thought process that you should have on your own. Define working hours. You don't want people showing up there randomly, maybe on Sunday. Maybe it's where you live and you're like, I'm not working on Sunday. Why are you coming up here on Sunday? Like, you're interrupting my personal day, or my only day of peace, or maybe, it could be many things. So define clearly what are your volunteer work hours. So it might be a day that you're in your farm and you want to be there, right? You generally want to be with the person who's going to be randomly showing up in your farm. So what are the working hours? Well, Tuesdays are the days that I don't have to go out, or Tuesdays are the days that I don't go out fishing. I just stay and clean fish, and I need help cleaning fish. So boom, on Tuesdays, I'm available from 8 to noon. And there you have that very specific time frame. People can come and support you. Have the protocols, the proper protocols on like cleaning or explaining, your instructions. Have them very clearly explained before the whole process, during, and then after. Like what are the steps, and check in often, right? If there's maybe a person that's very independent and might do something and like, I'm done, maybe might need more support. So always kind of weigh that in as well. And then, once done, always be grateful. And that could be as simple as, giving some fruit or a thank you. Really, you can get creative on how you want to show that gratefulness, because that's, even if it's a small thing, it's a good takeaway for the volunteer. And then I always recommend to provide a means to donate to your project, even if it's just a jar that you have that says donations. Hey, that is something that you might just put there, and people, on their way out, they might empty out their pockets and leave, their extra change there. So again, you never know what avenues you can provide for them to support you further. It might be that simple, or it might be a PayPal account, right? So again, that's something that you can take a look at, but just to provide you some ideas on how you can also monetize these type of opportunities aside from the support that you already will be getting, right? One example that I really, really like on volunteering is Rich Tarif in St. Croix in Virgin Islands. They have an amazing kind of like setup for their volunteer opportunities. And so they, within their webpage, they have a whole separate tab, which is just for volunteering. And they have, very beautifully explained the processes that they're, upon COVID times, things have been very shaky for all of these opportunities, but now they're slowly bringing back volunteers. They have various ways in which you can volunteer. You can do short-term or long-term opportunities. They have a full orientation on the website, even forms that you have to fill out on their website, and they have clearly stated the working hours. So this is a great example, and I invite you all to further look into their webpage, and you can see, what I'm talking about in regards to what are good examples about volunteering opportunities. Moving on to accommodations, and I don't know, I've seen maybe a couple comments pop up. Wadis, I don't know if there's maybe a question in there. I, at this point, still not able to see my cursor.
Yep. No, we're good. By now we're good. Yes, some two comments about that. One of the participants in the webinar have a beach house, and other one say that they are being on Reach to Reef farm.
Oh, awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, Rich Tarif is also part of our food producer network. Nate is an amazing collaborator over there. He's doing amazing, amazing work. He's also hosting our volunteers, which sadly have been very slowly picking up, but hopefully in the coming months, we will be having more volunteers on our end. And I'll speak a bit about that later. So awesome. Okay. Let's move on then to accommodations. And again, any questions, comments, please feel free to continue on sharing. And I don't know if this is something that you're enjoying, if it's always hard to kind of understand what the mood is out there. So please comment away. Hey, we're here. We're listening, Pam. Or if you're falling asleep, let me know so I can get a little bit more hype. I'm trying to tone it down actually. So let me know if I should stop doing that. Okay, moving on to accommodations. And so this is, again, another venture that you could consider within an agritourism offer. And this one, I'm bringing it up because it has definitely different alternatives based on your reality, based on your budget. And here I'm going to kind of be touching a few. The first one being a camping space. So camping, very low, right? Low impact, very low, low key. So it's something that you can easily identify, within a space in your property. Maybe a space that you're not using within production. Hey, maybe it's an area that has, a more forested area, and you can maybe clear up the area below. And then you can set it up as a camping space. And I've seen this run different ways. They charge either by the tent or by person. There's definitely some basic services that you should at least have available or provide. And if not, be open about the fact that they're not available, such as water, right? A source of water, even if it's like just, you extend some piping and you put just one pipe there and people can grab the water and use it and kind of brush their teeth or use it for their basic things, right? that could be, or hey, we don't have water, bring your own, right? So that's something you can think through, but water is always an essential. Also, bathroom situation, and that could also be within camping various options. You can say, hey, this is al natural, you have to go into this area, and you can maybe set out the area or set out the process, and like, hey, you have to bring in, I don't know, you know, you can think about how you want to go about that. Maybe you have a composting toilet, and this is something that I've seen more and more in different projects, and I invite you to maybe kind of Google that composting toilet. um, but it's essentially kind of like a dry toilet. You have a bucket, and maybe you kind of put together some very rustic little house or shed, and you complement that with some sort of dry material. And so it's supposed to kind of soak in any wetness and odor as well. So composting toilet could be a possibility, and maybe you want to go full in and you want to build your own thing, you right, with and dig out. Sorry, I don't have the technical words for it, but you catch my drift, right? You can go as um I guess as much as your budget allows you to when it comes to providing those basic services within a camping site. Other than that is really, having the availability to do a check-in and a check-out. And within all of these, I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about all of those policies that you should think through. So let's move on into glamping. Which glamping, if someone has heard of that, you can share in this chat. Glamping is essentially camping with glamour. So it's glamping, and it's camping but a step up. And so these are essentially these, I would say, semi-permanent structures that you can either buy or build, and they provide the camping sort of environment, but with some, better amenities. And so you might not be sleeping in a sleeping bag, but in a nice, comfy bed. And you might have an actual bathroom, an actual kitchen, but it's all within this tiny home or within this bubble. There's actually these really weird interesting bubbles now that are popping up everywhere. There's one even here in my hometown in the middle of nowhere in Puerto Rico. So these are interesting to see kind of popping up everywhere. I've seen domes as well. And so there's actually architect firms that are moving towards building these kind of like semi-permanent structures. And you can even buy those online. You can see there's these modules, and they teach you how to build them even. So glamping could be an option as well. This obviously, as I mentioned, would be depending on your budget. Another form of accommodation could be a bed and breakfast, right? You might have some extra rooms, or maybe and property closed or attached to your own that you can rent out. And then you can provide some basic services, just as breakfast or some foods within the day. A bread and breakfast is definitely your choice for the making, and you can work through that designing, either if you want them to be completely separate from your own thing and set up a separate maybe area for them. You can design that. And actually what we have right now in the picture is a bed and breakfast that is located in the mountains in Puerto Rico called El Pretexto. And that's actually our program manager, Cristal Diaz. She runs this B&B, and she has various options in which that people can stay. She has a separate lodging and then a room in her house. So as I mentioned, it really depends also on your facilities and what you're able to work around with. But you also might have, a huge property, and you might want to do a separate thing overall. You want to do like maybe a cabin in the middle of the woods, or a cabin in the middle of the, plantain fields, and they're, they have a separate entrance, or maybe they do have an entrance and then they have a separate way of getting there, and it's them on their own and a whole independent experience. That could be too. And so there's definitely market for all of these. You have travelers that are looking to have these low impact opportunities such as camping, but you might find someone that's looking to do, an off the grid opportunity in this nice little cabin, and has all the amenities that they need and they would have back home. So this is, again, depending on what you're looking at, what your reality is, and what you are, wanting to provide as a service. The cool thing about accommodations, providing accommodations, is that you already have a captive audience. And so that's when all the other attractions could easily connect. And so within your accommodation, you have these other attractions that can complement. So you have, you might have your breakfast, lunch, and dinners that are part of the package or that are separate, and that you can, offer as, for $5 more, you can get breakfast or you can get brunch. You can get dinner, and it's a farm to table, and you can pick your own fruits and eat them, you can provide a tour, which we already talked about, right? You already know how to put together a tour. So boom, you already have an attraction within your accommodations that you can provide there. Workshops, people want to learn stuff all the time, and more people are looking to learn things while they're traveling. So maybe you want to put a workshop on how to do jams. You do, I don't know, passion fruit jams or some sort of local berry jam, and they, once they're done with it, that's their souvenir and that's what they take away home. Hey, now it's transcending, it's beyond their stay in your place. Now they're bringing you back to their home. So boom, there you go. You can have, an on-site shop, which again, buy souvenirs. Maybe it's not just for them, they're going to buy it for them and their mom and their sister and their brother, and everybody's gonna eat your jam and wherever they go back. So having a shop on site could also be a great way to move your product around. And then obviously the recreational opportunities that your business might have, that your farm might have, that your boating operation might have. Hey, you might have something like this example. This is one of our participants here in Puerto Rico as well. They basically handmade that little stand, and that's what they put their goat in, and people can go in and milk their goat. And so that's another opportunity that they can have. Experiences, right? People go with a lot if they have that. As I mentioned before, there are definitely certain policies that you might keep in mind if you're thinking about accommodations, because people are going to be staying in your place, right? So it's very different from coming in for a couple of hours, volunteering, or coming in and doing a tour, or taking a workshop, and then going back to her house. No, they're going to be staying with you. And so for the most cases, where you're working might be also your home. So you want to have some sort of policies in which you feel comfortable with the situation, and they do too, and everybody has clear expectations. So some recommended policies that you might be, that we recommend you to be aware of is having your check-in and check-out policies. We don't accept people after 10 p.m., right? Because you have to come in before 10, or you have to come in after 3, or between 3 and 8, or that depends on your availability and what you're able to provide as in check-in, check-out service. Check-out as well, you have to be out by noon. You have to take out your camping gear and your tent by 3 p.m. All of those details, good to have very clear. Meals, if you provide meals, if you don't provide meals, how much they cost, when are they available. You have maybe a late sleeper that wakes up at 11, and breakfast is over at 10. They're like, oh, I didn't know, blah blah blah. Oh, well, yeah, it was in the policy, you signed it, or you saw it, so those are things that help you kind of like navigate through those circumstances, right? Smoking policy, do you allow smoking, don't you allow smoking? Good to know. Payment methods, is it just cash only? Do I have a pen pal, a PayPal, a Venmo, any type of payment that you have available? That's always good for people to know. Would you need a contract? Do you need them to sign anything to kind of, check here if you have some sort of a form? Is that necessary? Children, do I accept children? Is my place safe for children? That's also a good thing to think. Because if it's not, it might not be the public you're looking for. So families are out of the picture, right? You're looking for another type of um, group. Might be the opposite. Yes, I want children here, right? This is just for children. Um, I accept pets. I don't accept pets. I have my own. I don't want them to get involved with other pets or vice versa. I love them. Bring them, please. You know, that is also a good policy to have. And last but not least, thinking about your neighbors, because again, maybe most of the locations that we're at are not usually accustomed to this type of traffic. So we want to be very mindful of our neighbors and having good neighbor policies. So when is it lights out? Do we have a policy on music? Do we have a policy on parking in certain areas, because people get really upset about, oh, they parked on my side of the lot or whatever, those are things you should think through. And if you even need to have conversations in advance with your neighbors, might be a good idea, right? It's like, hey, this is going to be happening. I'm going to be having people over, XYZ. Always a good policy to have, to be a good neighbor. One example that I can share with you all in regards to accommodations is this beautiful farm that is in Guatemala. It's called Caoba Farms, which Caoba stands for mahogany in English. And they are this gorgeous, gorgeous farm located in Guatemala. It's an organic farm. But these guys, check it, they provide a ton of agritourism services, not just lodging accommodations. They provide, their places serves as a community meeting point. They host other facilitators to provide workshops there. So they have like classes on yoga or like a ton of different things. And basically, because they have external resources coming in and providing those, they have their own tours. So they have tours in their farm. They provide volunteer opportunities. They have a weekly market. I mean, these guys are doing it all. A farm to table restaurant and a shop. So again, they have connected a lot of different outlets and a lot of different attractions to provide these services. And so people can basically jump from one thing to that. They even have this beautiful how do you call it, mariposario, butterfly. Wadis, help me out here, agronomist. uh
Mm, I'm in depth with you with this, Pam. Sorry. Let me check and I'm back to you, okay?
Butterfly greenhouse, would that be it?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm maybe it's a sanctuary for butterflies or something like this.
butterfly sanctuary, yeah, I think that might be. Anyway, you should go and check out their website if you have a chance. It is
Yep.
very gorgeous. Butterfly sanctuary, yeah, awesome. Thank you, Wadis. So again, you can be as creative as you need, as you can, because there's so many opportunities and resources that you can provide, experiences you can provide for your visitors. So the sky's the limit. And so this is actually their accommodation. Last but not least, they have a independent lodging in their farm, and so it's called Villa Valhalla. And what I like about it is that they describe it as a modern rustic house. So as you can see in the picture, it actually looks very rustic, right? It has like the little, oh my God, I'm losing words today. Uh, where the smoke comes out, and there's a lot of, you know, kind of like the stone look. But then there's pictures of it in the inside, and you can see how modern and beautiful everything looks. It's like so clean and modern, and it has a very beautiful kitchen and all that. So again, this is definitely an option that if you have the means, the resources, you can provide. Then it's an experience in and of itself. Some additional resources in regards to your planning process, in regards to what you can develop and how you can maybe further, I guess, grow in this regard. This is a training that I stumbled upon as I did my full-on research and I kind of looked through all the resources regarding agritourism again, I found this amazing resources from Rutgers University. They have this website that's called Extension Training for Agritourism Development, and it's free. It has so many things, like it has modules, it has training videos, it has a lot of forms. So this is a go-to site if you're thinking about this, um, as you know, to use as a reference, right, to kind of solidify your own offer and further expand your own knowledge. So I invite you all to take a look at that. I'm going to also be sharing the link in our post email, but a good resource to check out in regards to agri-tourism. On a more local context, and this is something that I will say that I saw a big difference. The In the locations that we're currently active, you know, the Free Producer Network, which is the Virgin Islands and Guatemala, and Virgin Islands and Bahamas. We're also active in Guatemala and Puerto Rico, so four total, or two English speaking. Virgin Islands and Bahamas. I did find for the Bahamas this very interesting article, and recent. It's from December 2020, that speaks of basically a very similar dynamic that happened in the UN context. But here we have the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Agriculture joining forces on the Bahamas level to create an agritourism committee. So this is fairly recent. I'm assuming this is possibly still in the works, but this is something that if you're from the Bahamas, you should be on the look for, because I'm assuming that they will be providing further resources, training, I'm assuming maybe on some sort of certifications, but at this point, I'm guessing that this is still on the works. I still invite you to reach out and to, if you already have contacts within either of these, I can gladly share the contacts that I stumbled upon, so you can maybe do some direct inquiries there. Also within the Bahamas, I found on the tourism side, there's definitely a great training process that the Bahamas has worked on from, I think, the late 70s, actually. So I was looking at that. I found that fascinating. They have this certification called Bahama Host, and it's provided by the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism. And so they have, again, a website that we will be sharing the link to, that you can, as you can see here, take a look at what does it encompass being a Bahama host. You know, what do you need to do the certification. So this is definitely something that I found very fascinating and very well like developed. So kudos to the Bahamas. You guys are doing an amazing job in that regard. And on that note, I did wanted to then share that for our Virgin Islands participants, if you're in the webinar, I did struggle to find regional or more local resources regarding your tourism services or certifications, or even tour guide certifications. I didn't stumble upon none of that. So if you do have those resources and you want to share them, now's the chance, please, because at this point, I did see within the tourism department that they have some information, but it's on voluntourism, not exactly agritourism, and it seems to be also a little outdated. So definitely I will dive deeper into it. That is my commitment with you all, and share whatever I can find. But until this training, I wasn't very lucky. So again, if there's anyone out there from the Virgin Islands that they might shed some light, we can all benefit from that information. But while we're at that, I am going to then jump into the third aspect of this guide, which is, right, you define, you plan, and now you're thinking about market. Once you basically have your thing together, I have my tour, I have the locations, the experience, I have the volunteer opportunities, I'm going to go with the accommodations, I'm going to go with the camping site. How do I tell the world what I have, right? That's, I guess, the big thing. And the big thing, I guess, for the whole last year, right? I think the pandemic really made us aware of the need that more and more we're having in these types of marketing tools. So people are aware of what we're offering. Sorry. So what do we got? This is, I guess, the area that we can, I guess, further expand on if you would like to in a later training, which are these tools, right? All of these marketing resources, digital marketing resources that we have out there. And there's too many, and maybe we can get overwhelmed, but I really invite you all to think through this. And here I'm going to throw out there some of the resources that I found that really work well towards agritourism initiatives. So the first being our social media platforms, and this is no surprise, right? If anything, we have learned in 2020 that social media is a necessary tool to connect with our audiences, to connect with our clients, and how can we use these tools to actually sell. So if you have not yet made a more closer relationship to social media, I invite you to, and maybe this is not the first time you hear it, but in any case, you don't have to do them all. Just choose the ones that you feel are more appropriate, the ones that you feel that your audience is going to be in, and stick to that and use those to market whatever it is that you're doing in regards to your business, not just your agritourism, but your day to day. It's just so refreshing to see those and to really connect a story, which is what these tools provide. They provide you an outlet to tell your story. So if you think it like that, it might not be so daunting, right? But in any case, I'm not going to go into whys and which and none of that. And that's definitely a whole other training, but start getting, accustomed to them. When it comes to doing booking, right? All of these, services will require some sort of system, some sort of booking where I can have maybe dates, or maybe I can have slots, or maybe I can have a way of managing all of this information, even a way of charging people. Maybe I can do that all online. One very powerful tool that I've seen within the tourism industry is Fair Harbor, which is this website that you're seeing right here to your right. Fair Harbor is essentially that, a booking tool, a very powerful booking software that you can attach to your website. So if you already have a website, you can embed this kind of in a way that you can use that within it. So I know there's already some website platforms that provide these types of systems. So you can explore. If you already use, let's say, WordPress, or if you already use Wix, if you have a website, right? Try to see if there's some sort of booking software that they might have already embedded in their platform. If not, Fair Harbor is a great platform. It's a platform that you'd have to pay, but again, you can explore what it is, because that's the essential, right? What does it do? And maybe find similar options that might be free. So again, that's one tool that you can take a look at if you want to manage that whole booking aspect. Oh, sorry. Are you still seeing my screen? Oh, I think so, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Awesome. So let's continue on. But if you're not looking to invest, or you don't have the time, or you don't have the resources to do your own sort of system and your own sort of thing, you can also outsource, right? You can also look into existing platforms that provide these similar services. And one big one that I think it's, a lot of us already know is Airbnb. What maybe some of us don't know is that Airbnb now not just provides lodging opportunities, but also experiences. So you have Airbnb experiences that help you locate your opportunities, and people can book in them and reserve and do all that. So this is, and this is actually an actual screenshot of Airbnb experiences main page. And what I found interesting of this is that if you look at the pictures of the graphics that Airbnb experiences is showing right now, doesn't that just spell agritourism? Like cooking, animals, adventures, all of this just so naturey. I'm like, God, this is so on point, you know? So I'm actually, even that I found interesting when I was doing this research. So within Airbnb, as I mentioned, you are able to use that for your own accommodations, but also for your tours, for your events, for your workshops. So explore that Airbnb, and, you know, most of the websites that I'm going to be showing are definitely requiring to make your own account. So you're going to find that at the top right of the screen that you can see there, like that little icon. So you are expected to be, you know, putting together an account, which implies having an email that you can access, providing, you know, basic information about you, putting together a profile, and also making sure that you check into these platforms constantly, because if you don't, you might have bookings and you never know about them. People show up and it's like, well, I'm not ready for these people, I never knew that they were coming. So, you know, there's now ways in which these platforms communicate with maybe our emails or other, you know, integrate within our own, I don't know, text. So you can find ways in which these platforms can let you know when you have any bookings or anything. But do make sure, you know, or be aware that they will be expecting you to create accounts. Another example or possibility that you can use to market your opportunities is this one that's more specific to agritourism. It's called Agritourism World. And so this one is it has a more simple layout, but I found it really helpful as well, because it's either like plan a trip, get listed, or update your listing. So for our purposes, we would be interested in the get listed portion. So you kind of click on that and it's basically the same, right? They're going to ask some information of you. They're going to ask profiles, and then they're going to ask what your offer is, what you're going to be putting in the listing so people can go out and plan their trips. This is now a platform that it's I would say it's mostly used for volunteering opportunities or more educational opportunities, and it's more like, I guess, long-term opportunities, but you can also find short terms. But Wolf, it's actually pretty well renowned worldwide. It's called Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And so it's basically an exchange platform, right? That people join and they volunteer in different farms. I've heard, you know, a lot of wonderful experiences from people that volunteered via this platform. So if you're looking to have volunteers, if you're looking to have more exchange opportunities, this would require you to have some sort of accommodations too. So again, you can take a look at the platform and see if it's a good fit for whatever it is that you are expecting to develop. But then there's much more, and that's why I feel like this is, you know, the portion that I really invite you all to also continue exploring, because there can be NGOs that are providing volunteer services or that are connecting, you know, their donor visits with farm experiences, or there's so much that could be happening within NGOs that are working in all of your locations. For example, us, World Central Kitchen, our food producer network, we provide the grants, capacity building, and also we have the volunteer and agritourism program. So within that program, we basically connect all of the volunteers that are within the World Central Kitchen network to the opportunities that we have in our region. And so that's definitely something that, you know, still in the works. We're trying to better raise awareness because it has been very much organic. But at this point, it's definitely a great model to take as an example. There's also student travel. There's a lot of opportunities within student travel. If you're looking for educational purposes, you can take a look at what agencies are providing that type of services, but they're usually very specific about that, you know, that model. And then last but not least, you have travel agencies that literally dedicate themselves to develop destination opportunities. So if this is something that you find that is, maybe so overwhelming, or, I might not have time, but you might still want to, use your space as a host, or to host experiences. And hey, they might charge a percentage that is going directly to your farm. So that is an avenue that you can explore. Look at what local travel agencies are providing, and knock on their door. Say, hey, you want to provide an agritourism opportunity? I have a farm. We can set something up and get into an agreement on how we split costs. There's, from that standpoint, there's a lot of opportunities that you can also explore. But however, what I do want you to seek out and to understand and kind of take away from this training is that agritourism really provides this kind of like synergic ecosystem, right? Because at this point, we're just speaking of your agri-tourism offer and what you're able to provide in your farm, but that's like a beacon of light, right? And that kind of lights up in the map in a very, maybe in a rural area. And so your new pin might attract more things happening or more things aligning in your region. So it could be as simple as that, for the fact that you're a little bit farther away, a taxi cab driver might be able to transport someone farther out and get better paid for their work of the day. Maybe you have some local cafeterias that wouldn't mind to have an extra clients or two of people that after they visit their farm, go and eat at their cafeteria. And hey, there's a local museum that might be very interesting for a lot of people, and that you might attract them to go into that local museum after they visit your own location. So I really want you to think of this opportunity as a way to connect with your community and provide community development opportunities as a whole. So that, I guess, is the one thing that I want you to stay with.